Good afternoon. Before we call the meeting to order, just a couple of housekeeping items. If you would like to address the trust at any time, there's a signature sheets out in the lobby. If you would fill one out and give it to the appropriate person, we'll call on you at the right time. And then also, this would be a good time if you have a cell phone to silence your cell phones. With that being said, let's call to order the July 24th, 2018 meeting of the Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust. First item on our agenda is to approve the minutes of the June 28th Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust meeting.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, please cast your votes. And it is approved. Next up is to ratify OCEDT claims.
I'll move approval of the claims as submitted.
Second.
A motion second. Question, Kathy, if you would, just speak briefly to the two last claims on our list there, the bottom ones.
Okay, so the last two claims on your list, the first one is for the Scissortail Park Foundation. That's for actually the current last fiscal year's professional services for pre-opening of the park. It's a payment to that foundation in accordance with their agreement that they have with the city and the Economic Development Trust. And then the last one is for pre-opening services for the American Indian Cultural Center. They too have an agreement that was recently approved by the City Council, and so that's the first payment under that agreement.
Yeah, the reason I wanted those mentioned, the Myriad Gardens Foundation is going to take over the operation of Scissortail Park, and you will see recurring invoices like this as we go along. And then the other is good news to finally have some activity on the Indian Cultural Center, indicating that things are moving in the right direction, kind of slowly at this time, but at least surely. So you'll be seeing those come along, and hopefully we'll have a day when we can open that facility up. With that being said, we have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes. And the claims are ratified. Next on the agenda is items that need individual consideration. And Mike is going to handle the first two, I believe.
Mr. McAtee. The first is an amendment and change order for the Bricktown Improvement Project. The amendment provides for the overrun of existing quantities for saw cut and concrete pavement removal to accomplish additional sidewalk removal. And the largest items in the change order covered modifications to the east ramp to prevent debris from falling potentially on pedestrians below, reshaping a median near Wanda Jackson in Oklahoma to achieve better vehicular access, and changing the material under the sidewalks to meet city standards. The project is approximately 90% complete, although starting next week, work will temporarily be suspended to allow the Traffic Commission to consider an application for creation of paid public parking and a commercial loading zone within the project limits. The contractor will then remobilize to the site and complete the contract.
Thank you, sir. Questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
Mike, would the paid parking be 2-hour limit?
I believe it is in Bricktown.
If there are no further questions, I'd entertain a motion to approve both the amendment and the change order.
So moved.
A motion is second. Please cast your votes. And it is so done. Next item.
This is a design contract amendment to Tetra Tech. They are the engineer for Project 180 Streetscape Package 6B, Gaylord, Reno to Sheridan. Their scope of work, particularly as it relates to construction administration, was expanded through work added to the construction contract and coordination required for the installation of the streetcar rail. In addition, they provided continuing assistance in resequencing work and the associated milestones to provide enhanced level of public access. A final inspection for this project is scheduled for Friday morning, and staff anticipates bringing a final acceptance action item back to the Trust shortly.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, based upon the description of the scope, issues, and the work accomplished, I would move approval of the amendment as submitted.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second? We have a second. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, please cast your votes. And the amendment is approved. Thank you. Ms. O'Connor, next up.
The next item on your agenda is a joint resolution approving the Economic Development Agreement with Omni OKC and authorizing the chairman or the vice chairman to execute certain documents that may be necessary to close this transaction with Omni. Go on to the next slide. So what we wanted to do today was go through a little bit of what actions have been taken up to now to implement the Omni Hotel development. In July of last year, the City Council approved the redevelopment agreement and the hotel funding plan with Omni. The Downtown Maps project plan was amended and approved by Council in March of this year. We also created TIF 13 in March with an effective date of July 1. So that TIF 13 is the TIF district that includes the property where the Omni Hotel, the Convention Center, the new mixed-use development is located. TIF 2, TIF 8, and TIF 13 budget allocations were approved by the City Council also in March. These budget allocations were necessary in order to fund the amount of public assistance that will be provided to the Omni project. So TIF 2 will contribute $30 million, TIF 8 $10 million, and TIF 13 $42 million. A couple weeks later in March, the City Council authorized the issuance of debt to fund the public assistance, and then the OCEDT approved the debt issuance in May. So the Economic Development Agreement is a part of what's in your packet today. The key terms of it are the same as what was in the redevelopment agreement. So we're not really going anywhere different than what we've been in the past. This just implements the redevelopment agreement. It spells out the method and the conditions under which the public assistance will be provided to the project. So the city's portion of the project is $85.4 million. The agreement requires that Omni will make a minimum tax payment of $1.4 million and annual land payments of $200,000. There's a net operating income hurdle after the 5th year that allows for possible revenue sharing by the city. So if the project exceeds this revenue hurdle, then the city would get a share in any of the net operating income. The other items that are also authorized in the resolution today include a parking easement, which requires that the city provide to the Omni 450 parking spaces that the Omni will pay market rate for. We're not providing them parking for free. It also includes the restrictive covenant about the Cox Convention Center. If you remember in the redevelopment agreement, Omni requested that we cease to use the Cox Convention Center as the city's main convention center. So that restrictive covenant is a part of the documents that are mentioned in the resolution. And then finally, there's a memorandum of agreement that outlines the no subsidy zone in more detail. So the other item that was mentioned that was a requirement of Omni in the redevelopment agreement is this idea that there would be a no subsidy zone. The city would not provide a subsidy to any other hotel project within a certain geographic area. And so that agreement is also a part of what this resolution authorizes to be executed in the future. Some of the upcoming actions, we're closely approaching the time when Omni will break ground and begin the construction of the hotel. The closing on the real estate is scheduled for August 7th. We anticipate a bond sale for the annual appropriation bonds on August 14th. The closing of the bond sale is scheduled for August 27th, and then the groundbreaking ceremony for the Omni will be held sometime in September. It's estimated that the project will take about 2 years to construct, and so that schedule is to coincide with the completion of the convention center. So the agreement also, or the redevelopment agreement also had certain requirements that the city undertake the development of the parking garage where the parking places will be located. So we have met all of the conditions associated with acquiring the property and beginning the process to build that parking garage. So all of that is also part of the agreement. That's what we have today for you. So it's really executing all of the final documents that implement the funding plan and the redevelopment agreement that was approved last year by the trust and by City Council. Glad to try to answer any questions.
Comments or questions from the trustees?
Mr. Chairman, I do have a comment first, and then I think a question. From the distance that I've had from this has looked fun and easy. I know it hasn't been, though, and I just wanted to recognize, as I was reading through the documents over the weekend, and particularly understanding the depth that staff here and at the city have gone through to establish the funding plan and to do what's necessary to be the partner to make this premier opportunity really a signature for the city. I realize how creative you had to be. So I appreciate the explanation, the timeline, and a compliment to all of you involved in this that got us to this point, because in the outline it probably looks simpler than it has been. So first of all, just a word of thanks. And then a question. In the funding plan for the $85 million in bond issuance, I recognize that you've identified about $82 million in TIF. And I just want to give you an opportunity to speak to the gap. I know there's a moral pledge from the city, so essentially you're underwriting, but I didn't know if you wanted to speak to that for the sake of the record.
There are several other funding sources that are mentioned in the funding plan that include an allocation of revenues from other successful projects that we've undertaken in the past. So the revenue stream from the Skirvin Hotel and Bass Pro Shops are also part of the funding plan. And I am probably going to forget what some of the others are, but the maximum amount that was identified was actually about $115 million, and then some of that is capitalized interest and other things like that, the expenses that we'll have. But we're going to issue bonds in the amount of 106. Kenny Soodle is here from the finance department. He's probably more up to date on the numbers than I am.
So you all had approved, and the city council approved, a resolution authorizing up to, I believe, $106 million. As it stands today, we've got one of our bond ratings, which I'm happy to report was AA+, second highest rating possible, and we're going to be able to issue these without a reserve fund, which is another huge positive because it's less we have to borrow. So we'll probably be in the neighborhood of about an $86.5 million bond issue. The other sources, the Skirvin revenues, the Bass Pro revenues, state matching funds is the big one that wasn't mentioned in the presentation today. And I don't know if you want to speak to that, where we're at on that.
We anticipate a notification from the Department of Commerce this week. I believe that they're going to allocate approximately $29 million towards this project of matching funds. So what we'll do is we'll capture sales tax from the project, and then we'll seek the state will match that on a twice a year. So we're very excited about that.
Yeah. And before everybody leaves and sits down, I really want to thank the city's finance department, Kenny Soodle, Craig Freeman, Brent, Wiley Williams, Amanda, Carla Sharp with John Williams Law Firm. We have a great team that's worked on this project, and it probably has tested our flexibility and our conservative nature a little bit, but Omni has been a great partner to work with, I'll also say, and has made it easier than it could have been. It could have been really, really awful, and I think they've made a really good partner for us, and I hope they continue to be hugely successful in Oklahoma City, and we get to share some of the upside, so like we have on other projects.
Good. Well, thank you again. The vision is clearly exciting. I think we're going to look back on these moments before this and think, how did we ever get to where we want to be without it. But the documentation is really impressive, though, I think, in terms of the business case that's surrounding it. I'm thankful for that. I know it hadn't been easy to get there, so again, a word of thanks. And I would move the item as submitted based on the information shared.
To echo Jim's eloquent comments and questions, I would just like to reiterate, you said the creative approach. It was creative solutions, not creative accounting.
No. No creative accounting is allowed.
Is that a second? Was that a second, right?
That's a second.
Any other comments or questions? Kathy, as we go forward, Jim has alluded to the documentation package that we have. Of course, there's a certain amount of documentation that's already available. There'll be other things that will be made available in the future. How could a citizen watch what's going on and keep his or her eye on the progress as this project goes through the 2 years of construction?
Well, I mean, they can watch the construction, and then, you know, all of these items, all of these documents, the agreements with Omni are all public documents and part of the public record at this point. I think we're trying to find a location to put up a camera so people will be able to watch the construction of the hotel and the convention center. So hopefully we'll have it online and people can watch it that way. I will say that probably the next big step for us is the kind of logistical nightmare that we have, coordinating two almost $300 million projects each in about a 7-block area. So plus the parking garage, plus a lot of other things that are going on. So we've got a great team working on the construction part of it already too.
And those two big projects you're talking about are the convention hotel and the convention center itself.
Right. So the convention center is, you know, $290 million roughly. The hotel is $248 million. The park across the street is another $130 million. The streetcar is under construction. The parking garage and the mixed-use development will probably be close to maybe 80 or 90 million altogether when they're completed. So a significant amount of public and private investment in the area that will, I think, change the skyline and the landscape of Oklahoma City. So,
Thank you, Kathy.
yeah.
Action by the trustees.
We have a motion.
We have a motion and a second? I let us stir off the path and forgot where we came from. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Please cast your votes. And it is approved. Next up, we have what the Economic Development Trust was really originally constituted for, to provide initiatives to attract jobs to our city. And now we're coming to one that meets that particular challenge. So if you would, Mr.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is a economic agreement with American ATK Corporation. It's an agreement that this body authorized us to begin negotiations a while back, and this is an agreement for the creation of 76 jobs, where we'll provide up to $75,000 over a 5 to 7 year period with an average wage of around $44,462. This is like our other typical deals where it's performance-based. There's no payment up front until they actually perform, create the jobs, and we have verified them and they meet the requirements of the contract. In addition to that, they will have to prove to us that they have spent over $2 million in capital improvements or leasehold improvements in order for us to provide the incentive. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
The location of this project is going to be where?
600 North Sarah Road. And the manufacturing portion is there. They did build it's not part of this agreement, they did build a large facility on South Council. I think it might be in some particular person's ward.
No, it's near that ward, but that was a loaded question because there is a feeling sometimes with the people out there in that area of Oklahoma City that the only projects that we're interested in the city are those that are centered downtown. And this is one that is obviously not centered downtown and, again, will change the landscape out there and you really can't envision what's going to happen with this seed installation going in. There's plenty of land out there. There'll be other developments. The Chamber of Commerce is working, I'm sure, to take maximum advantage of that. So this is a starting point again, and pretty exciting. The other thing I'd like to mention is this is a small to medium company, 76 jobs. We're used to going, oh wow, fantastic, with the Boeing jobs, with thousands of jobs and salaries over $100,000. But this will meet the need in the marketplace for skilled workers in a whole different arena, and so that's an exciting development also. With that speech, any other comments or questions? Before I get impeached? Help.
Did you read the press release?
My cue card went away. We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Thank you, Brent. Please cast your votes. And it is approved. Next up, we have the Alliance for Economic Development quarterly report.
Yeah. In your packet is the quarterly report from the Alliance for Economic Development. It is the report for the end through the end of the fiscal year, June 30, 2018. Just a few things to highlight. Obviously, we've been very busy on implementing the Convention Center Hotel Funding Plan and redevelopment agreement. We are continuing site prep and getting ready for construction to begin. We've hired GSB to be our project manager here locally and help to coordinate between the Convention Center project with ODOT on the boulevard, with the park project and streetcar and everything else that's going on, and they've done a great job. The plans for the hotel were approved by DDRC last month, so we are ready to go whenever closing takes place and we get all of those next steps completed. We also, over the past quarter, received proposals for the mixed-use development that includes a parking garage that's in the block to the east of the hotel. So we selected Rose Rock Development to build a project that they've called Boulevard Place. It's about 241 units. In the RFP, we had a preference for workforce housing, so they have included some affordable units. We will be negotiating with them to try to increase the number of affordable units as the Urban Renewal Authority asked me to try to do. COTPA has selected TAP to design the garage, so we're really building two separate projects that are going to butt right up next to each other and actually share the garage, so it'll be interesting to coordinate that as well. On the job creation front, we're continuing to work with Amazon on their new fulfillment center, which is well under construction out at Will Rogers Airport. We've also been doing some updates and briefings on Tinker Air Force Base and the Oklahoma Industries Authority involvement in the past with that, with developments around Tinker, including the MROTC that the OIA still owns. Just a couple of other things. We've also been actively involved in efforts around the Innovation District, so helping the group. We are part of the group that worked to select the new executive director. She started July 9th to get the funding plan for the future developed and all approved by all the different groups that are involved in that. We have a very extensive land use and development strategy plan that is underway that Perkins & Will, as a national land use and planning firm, is our contractor on. And then we're working with various developers and people that are interested in developments in the Innovation District. One of the other things that we've been working with the city is the new Opportunity Zone designation. This is a part of the Tax Reform Act that was passed late last year, the Federal Tax Reform Act, that designates certain areas that are low-income communities to be areas for increased investments, especially of capital gains. So the mayor's office has asked us to kind of lead a task force to examine this new tool and see how we can best make use of it in Oklahoma City. And we're participating with Accelerator for America and a couple of other consulting groups on working through that new tool. It's kind of interesting and exciting. So That really is pretty much the highlights. There's lots of other things that are listed in the packets, but I'll let it go at that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Kathy, thank you. I just wanted to share a reaction. On the Opportunity Zone, I'm particularly interested to see how that might get some legs and get your expert thoughts on that. I thought it was really special that Mayor Holt was invited into that as a new mayor, and it's a real opportunity, as I understand it, for the city of Oklahoma City. So if there's any role that I and hopefully other members of the trust can play as you make some thoughts on that, please do let us know, because that seemed pretty unique and pretty special and a compliment to the new mayor.
I mean, we traveled to LA with the mayor a few weeks ago and worked on an investment prospectus for the community, and then we'll be breaking that down into more specific investment prospectuses for projects and trying to figure out maybe how we can become a clearinghouse for projects seeking capital. So I think that's probably our best role. I'm not sure creating a fund is really what we need to be in on, but trying to find a way to promote projects that maybe meet a certain criteria, and we're going to be working on what those criteria may be, and there may be an involvement for the Economic Development Trust in that work. So just kind of, there's a lot of ideas going on right now. It's pretty exciting.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I need a motion to receive the report. The second. Please cast your votes. And it is approved to be received. Next up is the Economic Development report from the Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Clements. You got a tough act to follow.
Well, I was going to say thank you, Chairman McAtee, for giving my report earlier. But there are a few other things to talk about today. I appreciate this opportunity. Whoops, already very sensitive control. Okay. There are several themes to this year's report. Year-over-year improvement in metrics, some noteworthy announcements that we've seen, and then a continued regional economic growth in the Oklahoma City area. But I'd like to give some context to that growth. We think about cities and counties, and those are the jurisdictions that we identify and that we work with, and they're taxing entities, and they collect money, and they provide services and public safety and support to the population. But the economy is much more chaotic than that. It's not very well organized, except in particular sectors. And people live where they want to live. They play where they want to play. Companies invest where they get the best return. They're analytical. People make choices. They make critical choices from their own particular bias. But companies are looking for the best business opportunity. So when I think about a city or a county, I think about almost an island in some ways, with boundaries and very identifiable elements to it. And when I think about the economy, I think about a river, and we've heard that term river of commerce before. And that river is a continually flowing thing. So it has currents and eddies and backwaters. We won't mention any names about backwaters. The process is very much a dynamic thing. And when you think about 1.5 million people in roughly the 10-county area, while the MSA is 7 counties, we tend to think of the commuting area as being 10 counties. And that's about 1.5 million people. And even if there are only just a few transactions per person in the space of a day, there might be 15 million, 10 million, 20 million. I don't know what the number is. If you get closer to my house, I think the average increases. But if you look There we go. If you look at this regional commuter pattern map, and some of you have seen this map before, it's illustrative of a couple of critical things. If you look at Oklahoma County, you see that 87% of the population lives, 87% of the population that lives in Oklahoma County also works in Oklahoma County. If you look at the others, you can see that number on each one of those counties. Well, those are the percentage of people that live and work in that county. Then when you start looking at Logan County, for instance, with an arrow that goes to Oklahoma County that says 63%, 63% of the people that live in Oklahoma County work, or that live in Logan County work in Oklahoma County. And you see similar numbers for Cleveland County at 53%, and Canadian County at 53%. These are very significant numbers. Now, a goodly amount of Oklahoma City is inside of some of these counties. But the numbers track by the county. And the reason that I wanted to mention this is to illustrate the dynamism of the interaction of these entities. This chart illustrates our current pipeline of activity for new companies that are looking at Oklahoma City as a possible location. These are companies that are searching in a number of other areas around the country, in many cases multiple states and multiple communities, and they're doing a site location analysis. That analysis is intended to try to give them enough information that they feel like they can make a confident decision about where to make their investment. And where they make their investment is where they will create those jobs. So these companies have a choice about where they go. If you look at the previous year's lines, 2014, you'll see that it tracked pretty much the same in 2014 and 2015. And in 2016, it began to go up, and that was a major growth year in the pipeline. Now, these are, we scrub this pipeline and take companies out as projects either make a decision or they decide not to do the project, and in many cases, as maybe as many as half these projects don't ever occur, companies begin to learn that doing new facilities is very expensive, and sometimes they can expand an existing facility more economically and more competitively than to build new. But these are all new, yes?
Richard, did you have a major scrub of companies between March and April?
March of April of this year? Yes, we did. We scrubbed those out, but look how much it's grown just since then, which is why we do this. Whenever the companies go quiet, and they do, we put them over to one side on hold. We identify those that have no longer shown activity. But if we're not maintaining or able to maintain a direct contact with them and a process of advancing these projects, then within some reasonable period of time we take them out of the pipeline, because we're having a constant influx of new projects to work on, which creates a challenge in a growing economy such as ours. And I'll mention some of those challenges here in just a minute, but you can see the number 72 on there. The report at the year end, June 30th, showed a number in the 60s. And so that 72 number is just the difference in a couple of weeks. So now this is the cumulative number of all those projects in that pipeline. We don't always get numbers from companies on every aspect. And again, we're not going to get all these projects. We're going to get some portion of them. But when you look at the numbers here, you can see that there are some very substantial projects here that would be very beneficial. Again, not all these projects happen. So in our measures that we are reporting, the metrics, last year we reported 713 new jobs, and I have to mention that we had some misfortune in our business visitation group. We lost a staff member to illness, and we lost another staff member to a job change. And so we were not able to make as many visits last year, and you heard that in last year's report. So those 713 jobs are a product of both the new-to-market jobs from projects that we're competing for and the combination with existing companies that have expanded. But the difference between the number of visits that were made last year and this year is about 100. So we made about 150 last year, and we've made roughly a little over 250 this year. There's a dramatic difference in the job creation, much more so than the number of visits would account for. Again, we see a substantial increase in the average salary. We're still moving as well as we can toward the goal of $51,924, but we've come up substantially from the previous year. Capital investment, we're almost there, very, very close to that metric. That's a pretty substantial number. We don't count public investment. We only count private investment. The city's two projects this year, after the two big ones and after Kathy's description of the numbers associated with some of those other projects, would pretty much make this number, but these are private investments. And this is tax revenue. Again, in the green, last year's reported numbers were down just because of a lack of visits, but we're making real progress and advancing those numbers very well. Some of the noteworthy projects that are new to market that were mentioned in the past that you all have seen here before this trust because they have received incentives. Obviously, the Amazon project gets a lot of attention, and I don't know the numbers, but the sales tax collected by Amazon has to be among the very highest of all retailers, and the contribution it makes toward the city budget, it's got pretty substantial. CACI, creating very high quality jobs. Again, Chairman McAtee made some comments about the nature of job creation and the value that comes from having jobs in a variety of different disciplines at various wage levels that meet the need of the public, and we see some great opportunities there. On the retail side, we've announced new-to-market retailers of Costco, and Costco has announced one store, but their history is that they don't have markets with only one store, so I would anticipate something additional to that at some point. Then, of course, the Container Store has announced and is under construction. We have a very active promotional effort to try to attract retail activity to Oklahoma City. We cooperate with the city, and the mayor attended the 2018 ICSC Recon Show here recently, where we had quite a few meetings with developers and retailers, and we continue on an ongoing basis every month hosting companies that come to visit to look at the market for opportunities, and we work with them to try to guide them to make the best decision that they can. They have lots of numbers. They don't know the city, but they do know opportunity when they see it. Then the biosciences activity, this has been an ongoing thing for a number of years, the bioscience effort. We have quite a lot of activity. We do a booth at the Bio Trade Show, and this last year we hosted 240 meetings. Now, when you do a trade show like this, you always hope that you'll have the opportunity to have companies that have a very strong interest in doing something in your marketplace But you don't expect to really pick up economic development projects in that environment. What you hope to get is you hope to get the companies that are here matched with other companies that are doing things that are complementary to them so that they can advance their effort and have an opportunity to gain momentum in the particular areas of research and development that they're involved with, find new partners, and find other opportunities. And you can see from that list of organizations that this is a very active and a high-level partnering activity. And in this instance, we did pick up 2 leads, 2 genuine leads. So, in summary, the Oklahoma City area, this region is growing dramatically. We're seeing numbers that are really reflective of that pipeline number that's so high. We're seeing those kinds of numbers in all areas, in construction, in retail sales growth, sales tax collections, all the things that we typically measure health and vitality of the economy. We're seeing all those things as companies choose Oklahoma City as their best alternative for their investments. We do have some challenges, as would be reasonable. You know, we live in a world of competition for limited resources, and when you have a marketplace that's growing the way that we are, you have lower vacancy rates in buildings, you have lower unemployment rates, and it becomes challenging for some companies to find the talent and skills in the marketplace. But what they always learn is if you pay more, you get better. So in that competition, we have the opportunity to advance and raise pay scales with folks here that live in this region. And that's true also of construction and private investment that's going to occur as the vacancy rates in industrial and commercial particularly and in office become lower and lower, and the developers that have plans and have organized capital will continue unabated with the construction that we see now. We're always subject to the fluctuations of an economy, a national economy, some elements of the local economy, but one of those things that has historically contributed to our economic growth, the energy sector, isn't as much of a factor as it used to be because they have become more efficient in their development process, and they aren't employing as many people to do the work that they used to do. So in some ways, we might say that that's a negative, but I would say that it adds stability to the future. The fact that they are more efficient means that they can make a profit at a lower price point for the commodity that they produce. So that gives us some very significant potential for the future. I think that's the end of my formal presentation. I'll be happy to answer questions.
Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much for the update. The community information has been something of interest to me in particular as I've watched it over the years, and I noticed the data, the key indicated 2014 data.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I wonder if you could provide us at some time what it was maybe 10 years ago, what it looked like 2014,
Sure.
And then when you refresh that, I think it would be important to kind of understand the ebb and flow as you described it.
That's actually we have newer data available for, I think it goes to 2016, and we'll get that map for you, and we'll try to make a comparison to some time period in the past. That information comes from IRS data.
Okay.
So we looking at the difference in time really tells you a story.
It does, and the reason I appreciate that you've got multiple data points is maybe that can be shared with Oklahoma City Public Works, maybe it can be shared with ODOT, because as a region there's a cost to commute. Thankfully, if you look at the transportation research around the country, we do better than other regions in our commute time and our costs, but we still spend like $500 million of idled gas loss.
Yes.
So if you wouldn't mind, I'd be curious about that data, just
Yeah.
to see it as an economic
Yeah, we can
development
do
idea.
that. Be glad to.
Okay. And then recently, I noticed that the chamber was rightfully bragging that Oklahoma City, I think, was ranked #1 in terms of places to live and work at a cost of living profile. Did I see that right? And
Yes,
can
in
you
fact,
speak to that?
it's a little hard to keep them straight because there are so many of these rankings that have ranked us high. I didn't bring them with me, but we, just within the last day or two, we had a new ranking that ranked us at the very top for construction activities. And we have several others that show us very favorably in the ability of, they like to quote millennial opportunities, and they mentioned that Oklahoma City is one of the top 5 places for millennials, and the ability to buy a home and the ability to generate the highest level of income, all for millennials. So these are other people making an assessment of Oklahoma City, and by some criteria, they select those criteria, but we've done very well.
Any other comments? Yes, ma'am.
Richard, are you prepared to kind of address a lot of the things you're seeing on outdoor and everything else? Everybody's looking for labor, pool. What are we doing proactively to address our labor opportunities and situations?
Yes. Well, that is a particular challenge, as you know. With a low unemployment rate and high demand for jobs, it has created a shortage, and we should understand that it's not unique to Oklahoma City. This is a national trend. It's something that cities all across the U.S. have been experiencing. But it's absolutely necessary that we take a very proactive approach to try to remedy that situation as much as we're able to do that. And so we reorganized our group that makes business visitation into a group called Talent and Business Growth. And that group is doing 2 things. They're doing the visits that with companies, the interaction to acquire data and information and trend information, and to try to help identify where those shortages are. And then we're also working on a process right now to establish a training effort to help companies identify those areas where they have critical shortages, and then identify training sources and resources to help advance a pipeline of workers who can either increase their higher level skills or bring people into the middle skills area and create more opportunity to fulfill that need. So that's an ongoing process. We had funded a study some time back, and we've been through the strategy part of this. We're nearing the end of that planning process and moving toward implementation.
If there are no more comments, thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Entertain a motion to receive the report. A motion and a second. Please cast your votes. And it's so done. General Manager's report.
The general manager's report is in your packet. Might want to just point out the outlet mall sales are still trending above last year and showing improvement. So about 2.5% over target and 3.5% over last year at the outlet mall, and the rest of it's in the report.
Thank you very much. We have no citizens to be heard, do we? Any staff wishes to be heard? Any of the trustees? If not, thank you all for your attentiveness and your willingness to sacrifice and come. We are adjourned.